September of 2009, we were all gathered up at the Athenaeum Hotel on a wonderful evening, and we were honoring Helen Ebersole with the Community Foundation's John D. Hamilton Community Service Award. And we were all, had a delightful evening. But you know, in a sidebar conversation with Helen's daughter Kate, she says, you know, I don't know what Mom's going to do next. You know, she just had finished the book. You know, I'm impressed. You know, on the Post Journal and its history. And so the next morning, Mr. Peterson and I were having our normal conversation on the phone, and I casually mentioned to him, I said, you know, Helen's worried about what she's going to do next. And he says, you know what? I got an idea.
One idea.
Greg, he's never really short on ideas. So we had lunch with Helen within the next week or two, and she thought about it, decided this might be a project she might like to work on. There was some funding needed. The Community Foundation got a grant request, and we were able to help with getting that going, and as they say, the rest is all history. We are delighted now to have Jackson and Jamestown and the rest of the story about Robert H. Jackson with these two books. So that's my comments, and we'll turn this over to our guest about it.
Right, one would be fine. But the first day
You called me up. You said, I have this idea that we need to know more about Jackson when he lived here in Jamestown. Would you be interested in looking over our materials and researching the topic? And I scarcely took a breath, but said yes. Oh yes. He turns up in all kinds of places in the history of Jamestown during that period, the 20s and 30s, because he was a very active man and a joiner. So any history of the city, his name appeared, and certainly he was knew all the people who were in city government, the movers and shakers, and he was one of them. I was really looking for the essence of the man. That is, of course, I called my working title was The Intimate Life of Robert Jackson, but I didn't use that one.
Why did you use the title that you did, Off the Pedestal, Jackson and Jamestown?
Well, you know, he stands there on the pedestal at the corner of 8th and North Main, and he looks pretty stiff and formal, and that wasn't what I was writing about. And everybody who knew him in Jamestown called him Bob, and he was everybody's friend, and he certainly was a far different person than what you look at if you look at the statue. So that just seemed like a kind of a good title. 1909, he graduated from Jamestown High School.
He found himself involved in various organizations. What were some of them?
Well, he very shortly after he came and started practice, he joined the Eagles, the Elks. His family were longtime Masons, so he was very active in the Masons, although he did not receive the 33rd degree officially till 1931. Or was it 30? He had to come back from Washington to receive it. There were these big celebrations in his honor at that time. Saturday Night Club was a club of community people. Was pretty much organized by some of you would know the name of Ernest Cockcroft, who was in city government, a close friend of Jackson's, but he organized it, and they would meet, well, sometimes it's called the Saturday Evening or Saturday Night Club, and I don't know if they met every Saturday or not, but they would have a topic and a speaker who would talk about the topic, and then a discussion, and those were the days there were no television, they had radio, but people really went out, it's true, and discussed international problems of the Balkans and the war situation during the First World War time, and all the questions that people are talking about today, but they're not meeting and discussing them in the same way. And then the Eagles had a Sunday afternoon discussion program, not as often occasional speakers or local speakers or guest speakers would come in, but they would always involve a discussion afterwards, so everybody in the club got to talk about it. in a real gamut of cases. He would take cases that he felt he could defend. He was really good at defense. I think, what's Gerhardt's book, American's Advocate? Is that Gerhardt's book? Yeah. And I mean, he really, and when he did a case, no matter, if it was the railroad guy workers and then I spoke, as many of you know, the dairy case, the farmer and the typhoid fever scare and so forth. He defended the farmer, and he would just go out on the farm and look over the land, and he liked to know what he was defending, and he liked to get every fact and the site where things happened. Very thorough. After the case was over, Jamestown very quickly built another sewage plant.
With the Lakewood stock farm.
Yep.
Could you explain a little bit about maybe the genesis of the farm itself and who was involved in it?
Well, it was the early 30s that Jackson, who really, he and his wife both were very good riders. They participated in raw horse shows and got medals for riding, as well as their children, especially their daughter. And so then he joined with Crawford Barger and Elmer Selstrom, and the three of them, well, it was Crawford and his wife May, they bought the derelict-looking stock farm area, and Jackson owned half interest, and the Selstrom Barger owned a quarter each. They really created a real riding area. They repaired the barns, built more barns, and the interesting thing that we're trying to find out what Jackson was really like, that he would go out there, knock down the old stables and so forth, paint the walls. He did a lot of the work, and he really liked that. And when he was done working, he'd sit around, as an expression from something I read, he'd sit around talking horse, which my son thought was a wonderful expression, with sitting on the bales of hay and talking to the guys.
What did you learn that sort of surprised you?
About Jackson?
Yeah. Or about me, either way, I don't care.
Well, that book remains to be written. So keep all your old diaries and things. I don't know. He was sort of a characterless kind of person to me when I started. I was surprised at his ambition. I did not realize that he was, and that ambition just comes through in everything he does. It's not that ambition is bad, but he always seemed to be, pushing ahead and getting the next step and getting to know the right people. I think I was really surprised at his ambition.
Was there something you read that really
of his?
Of his.
Well, I was.
Wow.
I was really impressed with the speech he made, the graduating speech, when he graduated from high school, and it talks about how Jamestown has been despoiled by the smokestacks. I think that's the speech, and how we need to think about our environment. There were environmental issues a little bit with him there too, and it was for whatever he was, 20-year-old or 19 or 20-year-old then. It was a very, I thought, excellent speech that had a lot. I quoted a good bit of the speech at one point. The history of the city, his name appeared, and certainly he was on the board of the BPU, I think, for a while, and he wasn't in city government especially, but he just knew all the people who were in city government, the movers and shakers, and he was one of them. So I had some idea what he did here.
When you did the Board of Public Utilities book on its interesting politics and dynamics, his name did come up representing one of the entities which ultimately led to the sale or merger of
Yes.
that. What was his role there?
Well, that was one of the cases that Jackson lost. He represented Niagara, Ontario, I believe it was called at that time, which is like Niagara, Mohawk, well, National Grid or whatever. And it existed in Jamestown along with the local power plant. And the two were in competition through the 1920s into the 1930s. And because the private company had to make a profit, they could not afford to lower their rates, whereas the BPU, as we know it, could afford to lower the rates because they were self-governing. And they kept lowering the rates to the point where the Niagara Mohawk, or Niagara Ontario then company, could not compete. And there was a law case about it in Buffalo. And Jackson, as I say, he represented the private company. And after he lost the case, the private company left the city, which is why all you people who happen to live in Jamestown have wonderful electric rates.
What did you learn that sort of surprised you?
About Jackson?
Yeah. Or about me, either way, I don't care.
Well, that book remains to be written. So keep all your old diaries and things. I don't know. He was sort of a characterless kind of person to me when I started. I was surprised at his ambition. I did not realize that he was, and that ambition just comes through in everything he does. It's not that ambition is bad, but he always seemed to be, pushing ahead and getting the next step and getting to know the right people. He went to a lot of the bars, but what he really liked to do was hang around in the corridors and, press the flesh, talk to people, and just, learn the news and see what opportunity might come up for him next. I think I was really surprised at his ambition.
As you got done with this, is there things that you said, gee, I really wish I had more information about the book itself? Was there sort of an area of void where there's just no material on it that I'd like to have answered the question, but I don't have the information?
I can't think of anything right now.
Right.
There probably were things when I was looking for personal items about him. I must say, early in the development of the Jackson Center, Greg interviewed all the people who knew Jackson. Most of them were little boys then, back in the 20s and 30s. But there's this, I don't know how many you have, 20 some DVDs and so forth, and they were just invaluable because many of the people just talked very frankly about Jackson, and that's where I learned a lot about the little anecdotes, which are the things that make the humanity of a person. But and they were very good, and it's a great thing you did, because most of those people are gone now, many of them.
True. Your book now is really, like I said, one of only 3 that there is on Jackson, and been a lot of interest through the Jackson Center, people who bought them and from far away, because they really want to try to fill in this void. Question I'm sure Judge Gerasi is going to ask in just a second is,
Oh gosh.
what's next?
Oh, is he going to ask that? Well, maybe. How many? You got any diaries and stuff? Maybe you need the treatment.
Yeah.
Okay.
He does need the Ebersole treatment. He does.
Okay. Now, what was your question?
Well, really, after all that, what's next for you?
Next? Well, I don't know. Maybe nothing.
I find that hard to believe.
Well, I'm involved in community things. The Packard Mansion down here turns 100 years old this summer, and there's going to be festivities, and I'm helping with that committee and doing some of the background writing. And have you noticed all the site signs around Lakewood? That's the history committee under Tony, but he's done a great job. But that's really making Lakewood, I was Lakewood historian for several years, and it makes the sign at the top of the hill said, historic Lakewood. Then you'd come into Lakewood down around the main street, what's historic here? So I think that's helping, and that's a project I've helped with too. Wherever, if I can write interpretive things for pictures. It's easy, little short things.
I want you to write something about Jackson's boat, The Alibi,
Well-
which was he used a lot, which we had a lot of the individual speak about, but it was right
I think it was right sort of in front of, not the beach, but where the hotels had their, the big hotels had their docks. But it had to be docked out in the lake farther, because it was a, what, 40 foot boat?
30 foot boat, yeah.
40, okay.
But that's kind of a picture that it's very much a Lakewood connection with Jackson. He used to
Yeah.
entertain Bainbridge, Colby, and a lot of other
Oh, yeah, a
people.
lot of the well-known people, yeah. There are probably things that I could have talked about, well-known people who came to visit Jackson and such as that, who lived, summered here, which I didn't write about. There are probably a lot of things.
There you go, book 2. People here I know.
You've got to get more material, more basic material to research.
There you go. Questions anybody has here? Paul, you must have a question. You just can't wait to.
How long did you get those boxes back to Greg?
Yes. Well, actually, Joe Gerasi took them back for me. Thank you, Joe.
You never organized them? I think that was what Greg was trying to.
I know he wants me. I told him that one time, and he said, "Well, there's a job for you." And I said, "Thanks." But you know, well, it's kind of organized, but you know, there are a lot of duplicate clippings and things that I'm a big thrower-outer that I would get rid of, but I wasn't allowed to. You know, if you read the same speech 3 times or the same thing. There's some good. I would just wanted to mention the material about Jackson. That there were the 4 lectures that I can't remember the name, that they gave, eulogy lectures. It was some. Maybe you know the name of it, that had a lot of interesting material, because these men had known Jackson personally earlier when he was here and then on through his career. And I got a lot of good material from it. Those were good. I just wanted to say one thing when I mentioned about Jackson's ambition, which is good and bad, but I also was struck by the depth of his thought. And he really had a deep spiritual feeling also in some of his writings, as I quoted some briefly in the book. That in that, you know, ambition may sound like you're a superficial person just getting to know important people, but he really had a real depth of feeling about life, about death, which he wrote about. And so I wanted to make that point also. He was very well-rounded, I guess you'd say.
Well, exactly. Any other questions?
Helen, one question.
Yeah.
Obviously, Robert H. Jackson, known for his writing.
Yeah.
And one of the greatest writers of that time frame, and maybe that century. And obviously, that's what you do. Was there one particular speech, or was there something you read that really
Of his?
Of his.
Well, I was,
You said, wow.
I was really impressed with the speech he made, the graduating speech, when he graduated from high school, and it talks about how Jamestown has been despoiled by the smokestacks. I think that's the speech, and how we need to think about our environment. They see there were environmental issues a little bit with him there too, and it was a very, for whatever he was, 20-year-old or 19 or 20-year-old then, it was a very, I thought, excellent speech that had a lot. I quoted a good bit of the speech at one point.
Greg, I don't have a question, but some of the material that you had in those boxes were put together by Henry Weiler.
Yes.
Collected a number of decisions that Justice Jackson had, and cases that he had been involved in Chautauqua County, some of which went up on appeal. And he did an incredible job of organizing a couple of notebooks. I just wanted to...
Yeah, Henry's work was well organized. That was, easy to go through. He labeled things, and he had them in good order and so forth. So maybe somebody will organize stuff for you sometime.
That person may be Helen Ebersole.
I don't know.
I'm just thrilled, and you talk about ambition and getting to know the right people, and I know in my world I have had a chance to meet some interesting people, but the right people are people like you. And it's just a thrill. I can't tell you on behalf of the Community Foundation, the Jackson Center, that this book has meant a lot to us, because now we have in a formable publication something which otherwise you could not really easily grab onto. It was not organized and maybe still not be organized, but fortunately you've taken that disorganization and put it into organization. And so
Good.
on behalf of all of us, Helen, thank you very, very much. I appreciate it so
Thank
much.
you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Because of the Chautauqua Region Community Foundation, all the proceeds, everything, all $20, all goes to the Lakewood Library. So,
Oh, that's wonderful.
yeah.
That's
So thank the Community Foundation for all of that.
It's wonderful.
That's terrific.
Or not more and not less, right? Right. Well, one would be fine. But the first day, you know,